canciller Juan Ramón de la Fuente y al secretario de...
Welcome Secretary of Foreign Affairs Juan Ramón de la Fuente and Secretary Marco Rubio. Good morning and welcome to our guests, the press, and those following the press conference through social media. To begin, Secretary Juan Ramón de la Fuente, then both secretaries will give their remarks, and then we'll open up a Q&A session. Good morning to you all. Allow me to begin, Mr. Secretary, from the State, Mr. Marco Rubio from the State Department. Welcome to the Department of Foreign Affairs of Mexico. You and Mr. Ambassador and the distinguished delegation that's here with you today are most welcome. I would also like, Mr. Secretary, to thank you. Thank you and your team for the great work that we have been able to undertake in the last few months, and that has led us to this morning having a meeting with President Claudia Sheinbaum, a constructive, active, cordial meeting with a well-defined route for sure. I'd like to now share with you the joint statement that we have agreed on with the State Department of the United States. The governments of Mexico affirm our cooperation in matters of security, respect of sovereignty and territorial integrity, shared responsibility and differential responsibility, as well as on mutual trust. The goal is to work with them through reinforced and strengthened cooperation amongst our respective national security institutions, law enforcement, and judicial authorities. Furthermore, we will collaborate to address the illegal movement of people across borders. This cooperation, through specific and immediate actions, will strengthen security throughout our shared border, will stop and other illicit drugs, and will put an end to arms trafficking. Both governments' high-level implementation group that will meet regularly to follow up on joint commitments and actions undertaken within our own countries strengthen security at the border to prevent fuel theft, increasing inspections, investigations, and legal processes to stop the flow of drugs trafficking. Our joint coordination and collaboration will allow us to strengthen the border, reduce fentanyl trafficking, and move forward in terms of intelligence exchanges, all through and within our respective legal frameworks. Both governments have the intention of strengthening collaboration in terms of public health and coordinating campaigns to prevent the use and abuse of opioids and other substances. Both governments reaffirm our determination to cooperate citizens and make our community. This is the joint statement that we share on this occasion. Mr. Secretary, you have the floor.
Thank you very much for the warm welcome we've had today. We were welcomed by the President and were able to speak to her for quite a long time. It was very productive. Mr. Foreign Minister, thank you as well. Ambassador Johnson, who's done great work and is doing great work. I've always said the will always be neighbors, but because we are threats, danger, and problems that we must confront. And I'm very happy that we've reached a level of historic cooperation, really over the last 8 months. Never in the history of both countries have we seen the level of cooperation that we have right now. Cooperation at a level that respects integrity and the sovereignty of both countries. At the same time, this cooperation has led to results that the numbers we've seen 55 individuals who were requested of difficult operation. It was not easy, and they were able to do it via the Mexican authorities and Mexican planes that took these individuals to prisons, the exchange of information and intelligence, providing training for both sides. This is still in Mexico. And that is why it is completely logical for us to work together and cooperate together. This implementation group, I know that will, when it comes to our cooperation, there's no other government that's cooperating as much of Mexico and President Sheinbaum's administration. We are very appreciative, and we have a lot to do together still when it comes to making progress towards this common goal. So I would like to thank you for that. We have spoken many times. As we spoke today, President Sheinbaum has spoken to President Trump 14 times. Much has been achieved, and we will continue to exchange ideas and in our work. Different agencies, Mexico, to confront these narco-terrorist groups that are a threat not only to Mexico and the United States. They are that we have a lot to do still. We are very focused. As you've seen, the President is focused on crime in our own country. There's cities in the U.S. that are extremely dangerous. I live in Washington, obviously, a city that has seen a massive increase in crime and crime committed by minors. The President has deployed federal agencies and the National Guard to the city, to the streets, to ensure that this does not have to do it in other cities if necessary as well, because we all have problems and we need to confront them. We also know that many weapons that are in the hands of these cartels are weapons that have been purchased from a source in the United States, and these weapons have been trafficked, and this is a problem. Caribbean many things in English now. I said that in Cuban, now I'm going to switch to Spanish, and brevemente tuvimos Sheinbaum y el canciller de la Fuente. Tenemos una excelente relación con el gobierno de México durante los 8 meses del gobierno del presidente Trump. Es la cooperación en materia de seguridad más estrecha que hemos tenido, quizás con cualquier país, pero
I think that much credit is deserved to President Sheinbaum's administration in really taking on things that had not been taken on for a very long time. As one example, it was Mexican authorities who moved them out of jails and transported them themselves into American facilities where they will stand trial, and we believe not just serve the rest of their lives in jail once a jury hears their case, but perhaps will share valuable information that will allow us to identify even more dangers that confront our countries. Because of our geography, and that means they have ever been. And that is great credit to President Trump for the efforts he's undertaken, but I think also to the efforts of the authorities here in Mexico who have viewed irregular migration as a threat to their own security. Just remember that a significant percentage of the people that were crossing the U.S. southern border illegally into the United States were not from Mexico. They were coming from all over the world, from multiple continents, from halfway around the world. They were coming from Somalia. They were coming from everywhere and crossing through Mexico into the United States. And that was not good for Mexico, and that certainly was not good for the United States. And we have seen those numbers drop historically. And that would not have been possible without the close cooperation between our two governments. But there's more to do, which is why today we are formalizing an implementation group. High-level group that will meet and coordinate on a regular basis to make sure that all the things we are working on, all the things we have agreed to work on, are happening, are being implemented. We'll be in touch many more times because there's still a lot of work to do together. But this is an important and I believe a significant day in the relations of our two countries as we are able to continue to formalize this unprecedented, historic, and so far highly successful security cooperation between the government of Mexico and the government of the United States.
Señor Secretario,
in Mexico ratifies the good relationship and great collaboration that exists between our nations and that will continue in the next few months, and that this with President Sheinbaum was conducted to have a dialogue on diverse topics regarding our bilateral relations, especially security, an area within which we have been working hand in hand with. Today, we have come to a very good agreement, form and move forward with a cooperation program based on 4 basic principles. Shared responsibility, mutual trust, coordinated collaboration without subordination. As it has been pointed out by Secretary Rubio, in order to follow up on the elements agreed upon, we define mechanism that will meet periodically to assess progress and ensure the achievement of the goals that we have. This understanding, this agreement we have come to includes measures to combat illicit financial flows, stopping generation of violence, drug trafficking, and each in our own territory. We have also started to address the elimination of illicit tunnels that go from one side to the other of the border with training and border conducted and to have a safer border, to reduce fentanyl trafficking, and move forward in greater collaboration schemes when it comes to exchange of information within our legal frameworks, and also when it comes to prevention with information campaigns regarding the damage As you know, addressing the causes is a crucial component of our security strategy, President Sheinbaum. I am pleased to inform that this dimension of our joint work is considered within the mechanisms that we have created to work together. Finally, I would like to say that the sustained dialogue that we have held within the conversations sustained between President Sheinbaum and President Trump, and provides continuity to the first meeting, the first encounter that Secretary Rubio at the State Department at the end of February earlier this year in Washington, D.C. It cooperate, protect our citizens, and make our communities safer. Thank you so much, Mr. Secretary. We have space for 4 questions. Matt Lee from AP.
Hola, buenas tardes. Señor secretario y señor secretario. Quisiera empezar
with the Tren de Aragua vessel that was destroyed by the U.S. military. There still seem to be a bunch of lingering questions about how this all came. For example, how were you so convinced or so sure that they were Tren de Aragua members on board, and what kind of drugs were they transporting? And I'm wondering if you could address any of those specifics, as well as which unit of the military actually carried this out and how. But more broadly, and for both of you, the U.S. was known for decades and decades and decades ago in this region. And I'm wondering, one, Secretary Rubio, if this is the impression that you want to leave, and secondly, Mr. Secretary, whether Mexico shares the concerns that some other leaders in this from President Mr. Maduro share. Thank you.
Well, first of all, let me say that from an operational standpoint, I'll leave it to the Pentagon to identify munitions, units, and things of that nature. Let me say this. Established intelligence that allow us to interdict and stop drug boats. And we did that. And they bake it into their economic. What will stop them is when you blow them up, when you get rid of them. So they were designated as what they are narco-terrorist organizations. So the same information and the same intelligence mechanisms with maybe a higher focus was used to determine that a drug boat was headed towards eventually the United States. And instead of interdicting it on the president's orders, he blew it up. And it'll happen again. Maybe it's happening right now, I don't know. But the President of the United States is going to wage war on narco-terrorist organizations. This one was operating in international waters, headed towards the United States to flood our country with poison, and under President Trump, those days are over. Sobre la operación Caribe en aguas internacionales, y yo no voy a comentar sobre qué
the Department of Defense can speak to that, but I will say the following. These cartels have used maritime utes over many years, and we have intelligence. We know they're coming, but that does not work because these cartels know. They say, well, we're going to lose 2%. We're going to lose a certain percentage of the drugs we're selling. That's part of that they've included as a part of doing business. These are cartels that are earning billions of dollars. So they don't one or two are narco-terrorists. These are narco-terrorist groups designated so by the U.S. operating in international waters, and their destination is streets. And the president used the force and the power of the United States to protect the a boat. And that could happen again. It might be happening right now. It could happen tomorrow. It could happen using these maritime routes through the Caribbean are not going to be able to continue to act with impunity. They will not simply lose a shipment and be set free. That's a promise he made to the American people. He elected because of that promise, and he's going to make good on that promise.
Mexico's position regarding this matter is quite clear, based on our constitutional principles of policy defined in Article 89 of our Constitution. Respect to conventions and treaties on these matters. Thank you. Now, Enrique Acevedo. Se está permitiendo armas son los pasos para.
Y señor canciller, dando seguimiento a la pregunta sobre Venezuela, ¿cuál es la postura de México específicamente sobre la acusación de que Nicolás Maduro es el líder de una organización narcoterrorista con ramificaciones y operaciones en México?
Let me answer in English and then in Spanish.
Voy a contestar en inglés y luego en español. Una parte del grupo de trabajo, nuestro plan alcohol, tabaco y armas de fuego y el FBI que están involucrados. Y no se trata solo de México, ¿no? Estas armas llegan a Haití, a Jamaica, a Trinidad, al Caribe. Y vamos, a esto hará falta cooperar porque van a incautar armas. Van a decir, estas armas las incautamos, creemos que aquí vamos a tener que investigar para ver cuáles son las redes. Nosotros vamos a incautar armas y evitar que vengan porque vamos a desarticular.
And by the way, we think it adds to our own security. I would make one more point, and that's the unconventional. Some of these, we are increasingly concerned that these cartels are now. Imagine drones in the hands of these narco cartels threatening nation states, threatening security forces. So that's something else we're going to have entrando de diferentes sitios de Estados Unidos.
That's not only a threat to Mexico, it threatens Trinidad, Jamaica, Haiti, the Dominican Republic, different countries in the Caribbean. We're going to use resources from the FBI, the ATF, and disrupting them, and there will have to be a lot of cooperation there. For example, Mexican authorities a certain number of weapons, they can send us that information, weapons, and then through our systems we can identify where those weapons came from, identify what is the smuggling group, and then not allowing for that to continue happening. And finally, I know this wasn't the exact questions, saying so. It's not the U.S. government. That was a grand jury in New York, which is a quite liberal from talked about Nicolás Maduro, Diosdado Cabello, and others. So we are simply acting. We are only acting on something that a grand jury in 2020 handed down.
Nosotros tenemos.
We have our constitutional principles, which are the compass of our foreign policy. They situations that we are facing: self-determination, non-intervention, peaceful solution of controversy, of problems, cooperation for development, etc. And that's why, based on these same principles, is that we have built our cooperation program with the State Department of the United States. This clearly and unequivocally sets the route for Mexican foreign policy. So we will keep following those principles, and based on them, we will keep trying to create and establish the mechanisms that will allow us to cooperate and coordinatedly and respectfully with all those who will work with Mexico. Thank you. We now give the floor to Eric Martin from Bloomberg.
Yes.
Gracias.
Secretario. About the operation yesterday in the Caribbean, 11 people who were carrying. Or how does this fit with the use of a military force authorized by U.S. Congress? Does the U.S. have evidence that the people who were in the boat were armed or posed immediate danger to U.S. security personnel? And can you rule out, you mentioned the operations that operate from Venezuelan shore. Can you categorically rule out attacks on Venezuelan soil or an attempt by the U.S. to oust Nicolás Maduro? Also, from the but from the U.S. perspective of what was
abusador de la prensa norteamericana. Ustedes ven cómo abusan.
es algo que hacemos también.
Questions.
Cooperation agreement. Is the U.S. removing the 25% fentanyl tariff in place on Mexico that had been in place on the basis of fentanyl trafficking, or is the recommendation that you will take back to President Trump and the trade team? And finalmente, secretario, para dirigir una pregunta a usted, un gusto ver nuevamente, secretario de la Fuente. Con la larga historia de las invasiones que provienen de los Estados Unidos, ¿cómo ve México el
in the past during the straight of this same party, there has been a friendly relationship with the Maduro government. He's been invited by the Mexican government to the Independence Day grito and other ceremonies, including the swearing-in ceremony of the previous president. So how does Mexico look upon these operations vis-a-vis cartels in the Caribbean with links to Venezuela? Bueno, voy a contestar. El presidente de los Estados Unidos ha determinado una amenaza a la seguridad de los Estados Unidos, tales y
stabilize governments in the region, which in and of itself then poses a threat to the United States. What they are narco-terrorist organizations. These are not stockbrokers. These are not real estate agents who on the side deal a few drugs, nations who specialize in the trafficking of deadly drugs into the United States of America. They pose an immediate threat to the United States, period. If you're on a boat full of cocaine or fentanyl or whatever headed to the United States, you're an immediate threat to the United States. And the President, under his authority as Commander-in-Chief, has a right under exigent circumstances to eliminate imminent threats to the United States. And that's what he did yesterday in international waters. Watch these people sail up and down the Caribbean like a cruise ship. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen anymore. They're not going to. We're going to stop. As far as your question about tariffs, that's not, I don't negotiate those agreements. I will certainly go back and report, and they're aware of the level of cooperation that exists with regards to security. We've made a tremendous progress. And, obviously I know that even as I speak to you today, the economic team from Mexico is in Washington meeting with Ambassador Greer and also meeting with Commerce Secretary Lutnick. And obviously, you know, that we hope that will come to some positive point here soon, because our economic relations are very important. We have a lot to build on with the successes of USMCA. Brevemente en español, mira, esto se trata de lo siguiente. Estos cárteles.
Really, it's a matter of the following. These cartels designated narco-terrorist groups for the following reason. They bring dangerous drugs to the streets of the United States. The president has said that will not continue. They've had a route throughout the Caribbean with no impediments for a long time. He's not going to allow that. He designated these groups as terrorist groups, which is what they are. And yesterday he had an opportunity in international waters to eliminate a direct threat to the safety of the American people. And that's what he did, and he's willing to do it again. Based on that promise, and he was going to make good on it.
I will answer you in English.
In English.
Principles in our Constitution that rule our foreign policy. These principles are clearly stated in Article 89 of our Constitution, and some of them are very clear. Self-determination. We believe on non-intervention, peaceful solution of controversies, and so on. So these principles are the ones that really rule our foreign policy, and we are going to stick to them, because that's our mandate, and of course, those have been also the instructions from President Sheinbaum. Ahora, México es un país de paz.
And a country that relations with all countries around the world who wish to do the same with Mexico. Principles that are ingrained in our Constitution and that in good part are at the core of international law. That is why it seems very timely for me to highlight the comment made by Secretary pertaining to the way in which we have been able to create this cooperation program stemming from multiple conversations. What's most important from this understanding that we have come to is that it is based on these same principles that will allow for us to keep moving forward, addressing a range of topics that are mentioned in this cooperation program, all of which complex. But if we have that frame of reference in terms of working for cooperation, based on our keeping up our efforts, respecting each country's sovereignty, each country's territorial integrity, good understandings, and that will allow us to keep moving. It has goals, it has objectives, and that will be periodically assessed. Furthermore, we do this also the fact that in these first 8 months, a relatively short period of time, saying, and with good reason this morning, committing to would take longer than in just 8 months, encounters at the border have been reduced by 93%, actually a little more of fentanyl since the beginning of President Sheinbaum's administration have been reduced by 50%. The last information coming from the security strategy implemented by Mexico shows us that there has been in crime in the presidential report just a couple but it has dropped further. So we have strategies that work and that are based on these principles. What I would like to show the U.S. and Mexico is that we can build cooperation and collaboration models mutually convened and that are based on the commitment that are from Excelsior. Mr. Secretary, good morning. Mr. Secretary Rubio, good morning and welcome to Mexico. One question for both of you. This series of migration and other commercial aspects, etc. I would like to ask you, security, and what would we see of operations, joint operations, or forces in their own territory, respecting sovereignty? What would be the ideal scenario under which Mexico and the United States would these circumstances and these there can be greater cooperation. To take this opportunity to ask, based on the conversation this morning in Palacio Nacional, have you considered a future meeting between President Sheinbaum and President Trump in the next few months?
I'll start. I won't speak because cartels read the press too. I'm going to say the following. They've always existed, but we've broadened them because they're resources. For example, if there's a group that crosses the border, Mexican authorities know, they let us know where they are, who they are, and we can act. Working in Mexico, or that's coming into Mexico with weapons or whatever the case may be, we will send in and then they collection of intelligence, different sources, informants, for example, many providing testimony, they provide many details, and we can share those things together. Joint training, there are things that we can learn from your experience and things that you can learn from our team, specifically, for example, certain technologies that the U.S. might Mexican authorities may have identified as something that would help their actions. We could provide those kinds of things as well. So cooperation has always existed between law enforcement agencies, but we're talking about expanding that to a broader, more structured type of cooperation and dependent on the situation. But we both have intelligence we can share, information we can share, and all of that helps. And capacities also that could be provided through equipment if it is requested. They might already have it and not need it. La pregunta tiene que ver con
just as a great example. Let's say there's a gun running group. We don't get there in time to stop it. We pass that on to the Mexican authorities who can act on it. Likewise, they can identify a drug shipment or that's headed our way. Maybe it got past their systems, but now is in the United States, and we can act on it. Anytime you take people operations of cartels and drug organizations, sharing that information is also valuable. There's opportunities to cooperate in the past in other areas of the world, and they have an interest in purchasing it or have an interest in acquiring it, and we can provide that to them. Or vice versa, maybe they have something. It also has to do with joint training. Maybe there's things they do operationally that they have learned border, or vice versa, things that we have learned from a training standpoint that they would benefit from. That's the kind of cooperation we're going to amplify on and operate together on, and analyzing it, systemizing it, making it a regular, ongoing feature of a broader cooperation on an issue of mutual concern.
In terms of the legal frameworks of each country is so important, because indeed part of what was the legislative framework for each country and based on which changes are made. For example, in Mexico, President Sheinbaum has already presented some for constitutional reforms. We've just elevated constitutionally the crime of fentanyl trafficking. These are changes that each country is making at their own pace, but at the same time are adding to the conversation in terms of the possibility of improving cooperation. We now have a national security law that we have talked about on different occasions with the State Department team. When touching on referring to that, this way, clarity in terms of the legislative and legal frameworks that in either country and the respect of each is what allows for progress to take place in terms of operations conducted by each country in their own territory, and that the information exchange flows, that the intel exchange flows better, that the flows as well. I believe that with this new cooperation program for border security, that is why it's so relevant. We will be seeing in the upcoming months and years more and better results in this field, in this arena that is in the best interest for the people and government of Mexico and the people and government. Secretary Rubio, that's a better defined route for the future, and that will allow us in the near future to keep taking steps in the right direction, agreed on by both our countries. I would like to reiterate our gratitude for the willingness to follow this line of cooperation within the new framework that we have created, and I would like to once again thank your team because we have managed to get to where we are. That will follow up on these matters will be in the next few months in all of the items, regarding all of the items that we have agreed on. Would you like to make any final statements?
I'd just like to thank you for the warm welcome for the meetings today and for the cooperation that we've had between the two countries, and this cooperation that will continue to expand to benefit the people of Mexico and the United States. Thank you once again.
Muchas gracias a todos.
Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful day.